Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Transfinder-NAPT webinar, Best Practices. Does reopening schools require rethinking special needs students? We'll be back in about a minute as people continue to register and file in, and we'll see you in about a minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is my name is Rick DeRico. I'm the Director of Public Relations at Transfinder. This is our 13th Best Practices webinar that we've conducted in partnership with NAPT. It's a baker's dozen. We have something really special today. Today's webinar will tackle a very special area of school transportation, special needs students, SPED for short. The title of today's webinar is Does Reopening Schools Require Rethinking Special Needs Transportation? And we have two experts who will provide a lot of insight on issues that your school should be considering as you plan to reopen. As a reminder, this series is being recorded, and you'll be able to find it at our best practices page at transfinder.com. It's anchored actually off of our homepage. So if you just go to transfinder.com, all of our webinars are on that page. I also just want to again remind everyone that Transfinder is making its Stop Finder communication app available for free for the rest of the year, the calendar year, so December 31st. This communication tool is a secure two-way communication app that will allow you to communicate both with your community, but also will help you to, we're seeing more and more districts using it internally as district leaders, officials are communicating with each other. So you can get more information on that, get started right away by just emailing free.stopfinder@transfinder.com, and we'll help you get started. Finally, I just want to thank NAPT CEO Mike Martin and the National Association for People Transportation for their leadership during this incredibly challenging time. It's been a great honor to partner with them on these webinars. Again, 13 webinars, for the most part, it's been every Tuesday at 1:00 p.m. Eastern time. And then finally, we can hear, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. But you are very much a part of this, this event. And it's really important that you know that we are looking at your questions. And so we will be getting to those as soon as we can. We do have obviously a list of our own questions we want to tackle, but we want to hear from you as well. So please submit your questions in that question section of the control panel, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Megan Carey is with ALC, and if you can advance the slide, and she is the, actually the company just got acquired, so I'm gonna let her share a little bit about that story. She's the Chief Development Officer at ALC Schools. And Amy Tiedens is the Transportation Manager at Intermediate District 287 in Minnesota. And a little fun fact, they're both from Minnesota, although Megan is now in California, but still has fond feelings for Minnesota. So if you two could come on screen, we'll get started here. So thank you so much, Megan and Amy. I really appreciate, we had a wonderful conversation yesterday. I think we had to cut ourselves short. We could have gone on for easily an hour and a half or more. But I just wanted to, for starters, Megan, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, but also about the company you work for and what the work you do, and then we'll go over to Amy.
Great, thanks, Rick. So my name is Megan Carey. I've been the Chief Development Officer here at ALC Schools and in student transportation for a little over 12 years now. ALC is really an alternative student transportation provider, meaning we transport students in smaller capacity vehicles, typically in vans and SUVs, so not the buses like everyone else. We transport students in over 20 states and with hundreds of districts across the United States. So since we transport in smaller capacity vehicles, that really means supplemental to the school bus. So we serve students with special transportation needs, which of course entails special education students, but also medically fragile students and students that are under the McKinney-Vento Act or are displaced and might be moving around a bit more.
When you say, but before we get to you, Amy, because like when you say medically fragile, can you give me like a for instance?
So medically fragile, you have a lot of students that need temp control, right? Because they might have seizures. They're prone to seizures. You have students that have oxygen tank securements. There's a plethora of students that have medical fragility that we need to be a little bit more sensitive within their transportation needs with their IEPs.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Amy, welcome. Tell us a little bit about you, your role at the district, and also at MNAPT. And thanks for joining us.
Sure. I'm Amy Tiedens, and I'm the Transportation Manager for Intermediate District 287. That's in Plymouth, Minnesota. It's about 15 minutes west of Minneapolis. I've worked for 287 for 21 years, and I've been in transportation. This is my 11th year in transportation. So I do have experience working 8 years working with EBD high school students, and 3 years working with high functioning kids that had autism, high school students. So that has helped me to work, kind of be a liaison between our staff and our transportation staff to kind of help them problem solve of how to, work with kids. I'm also the special education chair for Minnesota Association for Pupil Transportation. And with that way, I gain a lot of knowledge from all over the state of what everybody's doing. So our district being an intermediate, we have 11 member districts. And actually, we have about 30 districts that we work with. And what happens is more of our students have mental health disabilities, but we also have quite a few that have physical disabilities as well. And for different reasons, the kids aren't able to make it in their regular schools because they just don't have the programs to meet their needs. So then they send them to us. And so I am in charge of our midday transportation, and then I help our member districts that are responsible for transporting to make sure that they have the transportation accommodations that all the students need.
That's great. One thing I love about having both of you on is you have such a depth, you're such a wide range of views in so many different districts feeding into your, what you're doing. So I think we're going to get a lot of just solid perspective here. So thank you so much. We're already starting to get some questions, but I want to start off with just a starting point here. When it comes to reopening schools, what are some of the unique needs that will have to be considered for special needs students? So what are those unique things? I'll just start with Megan, then we'll go to Amy.
Great. I think especially during a pandemic, it's important to not forget the fundamental needs of special education transportation. So, I think qualifying and talking about what are those needs, I kind of break it into three different ones. So, number one, pretty obvious, you got safety, both in the vehicle and for the student. Number two, you have to take consideration of their individual needs. Some students, especially during COVID or coming out of COVID, some students might not be able to wear their own masks. Of course, all the drivers will have their masks, but some students might not be able to wear them because of a sensory issue. And that can lead to added stress or anxiety for these students. So, on top of that, you have an IEP dictation of certain measures that need to be taken on an individual level that really need to be looked at in depth to make sure we're still we're still keeping, you know, the specific needs for each of those students consistent, which leads me to the third one, which the third most important, and I think most people in special education transportation would say it's the same, consistency. You have consistent teachers, which is really important for these students every single day, just as much as having the same driver is extremely important for these students every single day. So aside from the fundamentals, of course, following CDC guidelines as much as possible, I would say, because I think that some are a little unrealistic. I mean, most of us would agree. In terms of unique needs, though, all special education students are unique. So we really need to be patient and work closely with the parents and educators, and it has to really be a collective effort.
You made me think of something, and then we'll go to Amy, because I'll forget it if I don't. I did write it down, though. But for those of you who are attendees, and again, I mentioned this will be recorded on our best practices page, this might be, I think there's going to be some areas that we're going to cover today that may be valuable for not just your district leaders and your supervisor, but it might be also useful to forward on to parents. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think there's some tips you guys are going to provide as well for parents. Amy, so again, for you, same question, you know, are there unique needs that will have to be considered with preparing for SPED students?
Well, you know, first of all, I think all of us have we've never experienced this before. And I know in the beginning, you know, we were just all like, what are we going to do? And we're just, you know, trying the best we can. And so I think that's what's important for everyone to remember. And, you know, this is a stressful time for everyone. And even for people that don't have anxiety disabilities. And, you know, most of our students do. And so that's the thing, is just for the staff to understand that, you know, they've maybe worked with kids for a long time, but they even need to be more patient with them and use positive language. And just the kids need consistency. And this whole thing is not going to have consistency. You know, even if now we're talking that maybe we might bring kids only 2 days a week, and they're used to going 5 days a week. And we have some kids that they don't want to go home because they love being at school. They love their teachers, and that could be really hard for them. So I guess just being consistent, and then making sure, you know, our students are feeling safe, but then our staff is feeling safe as well. And so making sure that we do have the equipment that they need, the staff needs, and, you know, realizing that they have some fears and anxiety about going back to school and being safe and trying to keep the social distancing the best you can.
Okay, that's good. I will go to a question real quickly because we did mention CDC, and someone mentioned per CDC guidelines, air conditioning is not to be used. They suggest opening the windows. But they wonder, there's some concern about autistic students or others that could become overheated. Just so how do you juggle those things, and just any thoughts on that? Anyone can answer, both of you can answer that.
Right. Well, I guess, you know, we're hearing new things all the time, you know, of what maybe causes more of the spread of COVID-19. I've heard both things, that it's good to have air conditioning on to make sure you're circulating the air, but then we've heard it helps to have heat will be better, and to have the air on the buses. You know, when we start school in September in Minnesota and in the northern climates, we could have the windows open, but maybe for, you know, 3 or 4 weeks, and it's going to get cold. So but yeah, that's something, we have quite a few students in our district that have to have air conditioning, and we only have so many buses with that. And so that's something you need to think about. And it gets very hot in Minnesota as well in the summer. So I guess you just have to kind of be flexible and customize things to each individual student, because they could have a really bad emergency situation if they are overheated.
Good. Megan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Amy was spot on in saying it's really just going to be the individual's needs. I mean, you have a lot of students that are medically fragile, as we spoke about earlier, that need a temp control and they have to have air conditioning or they see. So, I mean, it's going to be a case-by-case scenario, and every single, you know, special education student especially do have specific needs that need to be tended to. So it's you know, making the best decision that you can and involve your leadership. Make sure people know that these are the decisions, involve the parents. It's a collaborative effort. It has to be.
Some people have also highlighted the fact that the CDC, these are guidelines, but not regulations. And so,
Right.
I'll start with you, Megan, on this one. You know, how are districts able to balance the resources they have, but at the same time follow social distancing protocol? How do you do that? And then we'll go to Amy. You know, there are limited resources here, and so, you know, I think the CDC had said, was it two students per row? And anyway, how do you deal with the limited resources?
Yeah, and I think guidelines are guidelines. I think it was well said when you mentioned that, and I think it's been mentioned, keeps getting mentioned around and around. Guidelines are guidelines, but when you're talking about special education transportation, it's not, nothing should be thrown out, but it's just going to be, you know, hey, let's take it one by one. But in terms of social distancing, there is other options. So, you know, a lot of students a lot of districts are talking about, you know, students that have weaker immune systems, and how do I, you know, what's best for them. So there is outsourcing. You know, there's plenty of companies out there that, especially there's a lot of time right now that there's a lot of companies that you can outsource with. Now, I would urge you to make sure it's a student transportation company and they fully understand how to transport students with special needs. And just look into the options. You know, some districts are having issues with drivers coming back. And if that's the case, there is plenty of time to be able to, like I said, go out and find a supplemental company that can help, and that might have other extra capacity and that have proper guidelines in place. But in terms of following it on a bus, I think I'm going to let Amy take that question because she's doing the transportation in the bus.
All right, Amy, thank you.
Well, you know, because I'm involved in our MAPT, we've been meeting once a week, and so I've been getting input what a lot of districts are thinking about all across the state. I don't know about you and other states, but in the state of Minnesota, we're still kind of waiting for direction from our Minnesota Department of Education, and they actually just told us that they will give us more direction, but not till July 27th. You know, most of us start school the beginning of September, so that's not going to give us a lot of time for routing. So what we're doing is, you know, we're thinking right now about if we're going to be transporting students, how we're going to do it. And so we're just doing the best we can with that. So I know a few of the districts, they're thinking that like on a full-size 77 passenger bus, they can't have more than maybe 12 to 15 kids safely on that bus. And then what they'll do is when they're routing, you know, they'll make sure that the kids, when they get on the bus, that they'll have assigned seats and they'll go all the way to the back and load that way so they don't have to pass by any students. For mid-size buses that usually are able to hold 20, 22 for 2 to a seat or 32, 3 to a seat, those buses maybe will have 7 kids on it. And then special education, the smaller special education buses that usually can hold 12 to 16, 2 to a seat. If they have a student in a wheelchair, have 1 student in a wheelchair, and maybe 1 other student and a bus aide on there. The other thing that we're talking about is having a bus aide on every special education bus. In the state of Minnesota, we usually don't have a bus aide on a bus unless one of the students on the bus has it in their IEP. And many times that is the case. If we have 10 students on a bus, usually one of them will. So we do have them on many buses, but I think a lot of districts are just they're going to have a bus aide on there to help to remind the kids about social distancing and role modeling, you know, wearing their masks and things like that. So.
Very good. You touched on a couple of things I want to get to, talk about the bus aides. So let's just start. Next couple of questions are focused on protecting bus aides and drivers, and then also protecting students. So, and I'll start with you, Amy. How do we protect our special education bus assistants and drivers from students who may, they may spit or grab or do something that could be disruptive?
Well, first of all, we have to try to make sure that they have all the protective equipment they need. I don't know how many on that have been able to get all the protective equipment they need. I've noticed now that they're starting to get in stock, but that's very important. Like I said before, you want to make sure that your staff feels that you're supporting them and they're safe. So having masks, for, I would say, most of the assistants, it would be good to either have like clear glasses, protective glasses, even if they don't wear glasses, or like the plastic shield that you see a lot of people wearing, and having that for maybe have something like a gown or something, or a shirt that they can wear over their clothing to protect them. So that will help, but just so they know that they feel supported and that you're supplying them with the gear that they need. But at the same time, that could be really challenging with students that don't understand, and they might be trying to grab the mask or the plastic glasses off of them. So again, maybe just teaching them about how to, be positive with the kids, but step back when they have to, things like that.
Very good. Megan, anything you want to
add? No, I think she covered. I know that there was a little bit of talk. You mentioned the masks of obviously the aides and bus aides, but I think a bigger conversation too is the masks for students. Of course, we're going to require all aides and all drivers to have masks, but really, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to ensure that some of these students have them on or even keep them on. Students that have sensory processing disorders or autism or serious emotional disabilities, speech, language impairments, or multiple disabilities might not be able to wear these masks because of their own unique circumstance. And some students might feel claustrophobic, anxious, restrained, or like they're suffocating. These are all things that I've been hearing from districts. So, when they're set, and of course, when students' senses are heightened, they can demonstrate less than desirable behavior, right? Which is not what anyone wants. So I think one of the biggest messages on that, and what I'm definitely hearing across the board from special education directors, transportation directors, educators really out there, is just that we really have got to be patient and understanding and compassionate during this time, and understanding that these students all have their unique need, but they all still really need to have access to receive an equal opportunity of education. So at the end of the day, just taking into consideration that it's going to be really difficult for some of these students, the mask situation in and of itself. So it's something, it's quickly kind of glanced over for the student aspect. Obviously, drivers, it needs to be it's a must, but for the students, just have to be a little bit more sensitive.
Gretchen asked a question about, do IEPs need to be rewritten?
If you're asking me, I'm saying I don't think I have a good answer to that. I think that every district is going to have their own, but I think for some individual students, it might need to be addressed, especially students that have a weaker immune system, medically fragile, and some of the special ed students might need it. It's just, again, the districts are really going to have to take it, and I know that special education directors across the board that I've been speaking with are already talking about reassessments for some specific students that have kind of been pinpointed. So I think that's an individual level with the districts.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think Megan, she answered a lot of it, but that's the thing, it depends on the student. But I think we are going to have to add things in, and I work really closely with a lot of the case managers and our special ed director. And so, yeah, talking to the teachers, having them communicate with the parents, what has been going on the last few months and what's the fears of the kids and maybe what will help them feel safer. We've had success actually with many of our high school kids that have emotional behavior disorders. that were being really distracted in the classroom and not being able to concentrate. And we've actually found out that they're actually excelling in distance learning. So I think that's what we, usually special education is all in person, and usually we don't have online learning for that. So I think we need to start maybe thinking about that with maybe some students. Maybe it would be better for them with their safety and anxiety to be in distance learning a little bit longer, but others haven't been as successful. So again, just have to customize it to each student.
Amy, you mentioned on the idea of loading students in the back of the bus first and moving their way to the front. Is that correct? Did you say that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Christine asked us the question about, is there any concern with younger students being seated in the back of the bus, especially with regard to maybe operating emergency doors if necessary?
Yeah, that's a good point. So again, when your staff is routing, if they can take all of that into consideration, Megan and I actually were talking a little bit yesterday, and she had mentioned that they're thinking about maybe finding out what kids are in the same classroom and try to have some of those kids ride together. Well, that could be a challenge because maybe one lives on one side of the city and one on the other. But that, things like that are just going to have to customize some of the routing to be successful. So if maybe have the younger kids, have them picked up last and the older kids picked up first.
And this is for both of you. Again, we're getting some good questions. I promise we're going to get back to our list of questions, but this is a good question from Karen, who just asked about addressing those who may be hearing impaired or vision impaired with how do you communicate the idea of wearing a mask with them? Have you thought about that? Are there any best practices in that?
Well, and actually with our district, we actually have a few students that are both hearing impaired and visually impaired, but we have a pretty big population of hearing impaired students, and we have quite a few interpreters. So that was one of the first things, is going, how are the interpreters going to communicate? Because a lot of the kids read lips. So we have some really talented staff that actually have been sewing and customizing masks. And they actually, cut a hole like this in there and put, like a clear piece of plastic in there, so you'll be able to see. And they even got plastic that's not going to fog up. So again, you just have to be really innovative and creative and customize things to the students' needs.
Great.
And I think another resource too is going to, and speaking with several districts about this case in point, one piece of advice we keep saying is go back to the school. The educators at the schools really are coming up with good ideas of that, and they know what these kids need. So Amy, that was a fantastic idea. I've definitely heard that one a few times, and I think there's several options, but I think going to the school and the educators there of, hey, what do we think is best for the kids? While in transport, it might be that they're covered. Maybe it's that they have an additional aid. Just again, got to get kind of creative.
Mm-hmm. What about your thoughts on taking temperatures of students prior to boarding the bus? Has that been an issue that you've had to address, to consider? Either one?
Yeah, we have to consider everything. At ALC, we have to follow the protocols of the district. So if the district has that as part of their protocol and they want ALC to enforce it, of course we will. Some districts have we already started transporting. We haven't really had that. A lot of districts have kind of talked about it, but it's very difficult to find the thermometers. They really weren't even available. They're starting to become available, but there's a multitude of conversation around it. I've heard conversations of, because every day it changes, right? What you're hearing in the news is, I was just visiting with someone at a district, and he had a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law that both had COVID, and never once did they break a fever, right? And so you're hearing all these different stories all over. So it's whatever the district you know, whatever protocols they enforce, we'll have to do. Now, some districts or some people that I've been speaking with have been talking about, you know, taking it at the school. Well, if you take it at the school, that's kind of a problem. So now you're going to put the student back in the bus and take them back home. Well, so are you going to take them before they get on the bus? Is it going to be up to parents? Can parents get access to it? There's just so many questions, so many layers deep for that one. So I don't have a good answer. Amy, maybe you got a better one than me on that.
Well, no, you said it well. Again, I've been talking to our different districts, and my district, we have not set protocols yet on that. And actually, right after this webinar, I'll be having a meeting and discussing things like that. But there's one of our districts that they're actually going to be having summer school ESY starting after I think July 6th. And they're going to have 80 special ed students that they're going to be transporting. And they are going to be taking temperatures. So again, they're going to have a bus aide on every bus. And they're going to have the protocol where it's all communicated to the parents and the students. That's the student waits outside, you know, on the corner, and the staff steps off the bus and takes the student's temperature, which, you know, just holding, you've seen that, they hold it up to the forehead. And then if the student does have a temperature, they're going to advise them they can't get on the bus, and then they're going to call the parent if the parent's not with them at the bus stop to have them come back, you know, to get them. But that, I mean, it could be an issue, but they're going to, you know, try the best they can, and they're going to communicate, like I said, to the parents what the protocol is. And I think that's important that, you know, the parents are practicing with the kids, especially the kids that are younger or don't understand of, you know, this is what we have to do now. You know, teaching them how to cover their cough if they're going to cough, and things like that.
Are you sending like a letter out to parents with like steps on, you know, some best practice like suggestions?
Yes, I think that's what our plan, and many of the districts are going to do that to make sure everybody's on the same page.
So Megan, well, both of you, Megan, you work with a lot of districts across the country, and Amy, you work with a lot of districts across the state. So you both have this breadth of knowledge. I'll start with you, Megan, though. If you could tell me a little bit about some of the scenarios that you're hearing about reopening school. And there's some creativity that you've heard. So I think some people might be able to garner some ideas from some of these scenarios.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios. You know, it really truly varies state to state, region to region, and district to district. I will say there's a couple of districts that I get on a call with, and I'm like, okay, what are we talking about today? And they're like, well, I got scenario A through Z, so let's start talking about what I might have to do. You know, there's scenarios of obviously bell schedules, different bell schedules throughout the day. There's scenarios of students only attending school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. I think we've all heard those being tossed around. Having middle and high school continue remote learning while, and what's been interesting is it used to, everyone kind of right away was saying, hey, middle and high school, we want to have them continue remote learning because they've been a little bit more successful. Obviously, elementary is a little bit more difficult, but also special education, special ed, and elementary really continuing to be in the classroom or to go back into the classroom. There's been a lot of conversation around that, and again, conversation changes week to week. We've also heard some, you know, districts contemplating offering. I just heard this one over the weekend. A couple districts are offering or talking about offering online to families of students who are uncomfortable coming back, because we're going to have that. I mean, you're going to have. I mean, every district is going to come up with a plan for transportation to be able to write a plan, you know, around all of these different scenarios. Is going to be difficult, but yeah, districts are definitely getting very creative in how to get, or what the new school year will look like, I guess.
You also mentioned the idea of grouping. You know, you may have a special education student and a sibling that they could ride together. So there's ways to also kind of deal with some of those social distancing rules and, you know, transportation. There's some creativity in the transportation side of it as well.
Right. There's a lot of creativity around there. So there's situations of districts talking about siblings riding together. Many students having, obviously the IEP, we've already spoke about this, but the IEP students, that it dictates kind of a ride alone scenario. Luckily that stays pretty consistent from year to year anyways. For those of the students that are medically fragile, as we spoke about, now putting them into smaller capacity vehicles, that's been very widely spoken about. And then, you know, they've really been talking about, the other one that's been interesting is, the classmates riding together. So there's been a lot of, it's been interesting because they're like, hey, if I give you all of these, you know, these 200 students that are special ed, can you tell me what, you know, and I'm going to give you all of the classes that they're in. Can you tell me if we can make it work? And you can try, we can get as creative, and we put it through a routing software and getting as creative as possible. But, you know, there's still the situation of those 3 kids live over here and those 2 over there. So I think it's just districts are getting creative and trying to come up with different and better solutions, because, you know, hey, if we can have a couple of students, you know, be put together that normally wouldn't have been put together, but they also are going to be, you know, students that are, you know, in the same classroom daily. And I will say in those conversations, one of the biggest things, falling back to what's one of the fundamentals of student transportation or of special ed transportation, is consistency. One of the biggest topics that keeps coming up is how important consistency is right now, especially because of limiting the exposure to the amount of people that they are around. Even though they're going to have masks and we're going to wipe down the vehicles and you're going to do all those things, it still does limit the exposure if you have a consistent, stable driver there.
And I'll go on that, and I'll come to you, Amy, but going to that line of consistency as well, this has come up in other panels, not necessarily related to special needs, but just in general transportation, the idea of having assigned seating. That's another valuable tool for consistency.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to kind of just touch on that for a second, assigned seating is, in special education world, it's kind of pretty standard, I would say, in many cases, not wholly standard, but it's pretty standard because you have a lot of students that, again, need that consistency. So whether it's sitting on the left-hand side of a vehicle or sitting up in that right front seat or you know, of the bus, like whatever's the most important, and consistency for those kids means the same routine day in and out. They say the same face, they sit in the same vehicle or the same bus, and they have that consistency. So, you know, I would say it's, and I don't know if Amy, if you agree with that, but I think it is, we are pretty consistent already, not just the drivers with the vehicles, but also with where the kids are even sitting. They really need that. And students, special needs students, really thrive on that.
Yes, I agree. We do, though, have issues sometimes with, especially the kids that have emotional behavior disorders. They don't like people telling them what to do sometimes, so we have to be creative with that, and that's why using PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports language, really helps with that. And, you know, I found when I used to work with EBD kids, they just want to build a relationship. They want to feel that you care for them and you respect them. And by, you know, role modeling positive, you know, behavior interventions and supports, they're going to feel safe, and they're going to feel that you care. So it depends on how you say it, you know, not demanding that they say it, but again, trying to work with the teacher and the families, you know, for them to understand, especially now, why we need that. The other thing that our district and quite a few districts are thinking of doing too is, or are doing right now, sending out surveys to all their families, because they're thinking that, you know, a lot of students or a lot of families might not want their kids to be on a bus. So again, like Megan said, offering if they can do some distance learning, if the parents think that's better and that's able to work for them, and or if they think they can come to school, you know, are the parents going to transport? So that's a big thing, because a lot of districts are like, I don't want to be doing all this routing, and I have, you know, let's say 100 kids that I've routed and only 20 are going to ride the bus, things like that.
Is that something that you would have to revisit periodically, just because you may have how they feel in September and how they feel in November may be different, so you have to revisit that over time? Or is it if you opted out in September, you're out of luck for the rest of the school year, or maybe we'll re-opt you can opt back in January, or how does that look?
Right. Well, I mean, with our district, we try to be as flexible as we can because we have just so high needs and unique learners. But other districts, again, maybe the parent at the time is laid off, which a lot of people are laid off right now, and they can do distance learning with their student, but maybe in a month they get hired back. So I think, we do have to be somewhat flexible. However, give timelines, say, okay, you're starting that this September. If it needs to change, we need, 10 days to change our routing, something like that.
So one person just asked, Jean just asked if there's actually, can they get their hands on that questionnaire? So I don't know if you could maybe share that with us when you have it.
Okay, yeah, we're still developing it, but yes, I could. So would I just send it to you, Rick? And
yeah,
you could. Okay,
that'd be great. That's one of the things that I love about this. People love, somebody else wants to know about sample polls and surveys that we can share. One person, Kim, asked, we'll go back and then I want to get to another issue that Megan brought up at the start of this. Kim asked, are you considering safety shields instead of face masks? Would that remedy some of the concerns? I think are they talking about the face mask?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've actually, I work with our safety person with our district, and he said that you're supposed to have, because I've seen, like when I've been in stores, even workers, some of them are wearing those plastic shields and they're not wearing masks, but you are supposed to be wearing a mask and that shield.
Okay.
Because that's
for students. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And she was
that's
saying,
okay.
For students, but you're saying either way, you're supposed to still be wearing a mask.
You are, but if we have a student that you think, I think all of you have experienced it. I don't have anxiety, but when I first wore that mask into the store, I had to just kind of slow my breathing down and go, okay, Amy, this is okay. So I think it's caused a lot of anxiety for everybody. And so we will probably have quite a few students that won't be able to wear that mask. So having that plastic shield would be better than nothing.
Yeah, some people have asked some questions about drivers and anxiety, and how do you, has there been some special attention that you are, giving to them to help either, ease their concerns, or are some of them saying, I'm not going to return in the fall because of anxiety? And I know we already have our driver shortage in much of the country, so that just might be one more problem. Are you dealing with anything to help ease the anxiety of the drivers?
Well, yeah, I work with, we have 3 different contractors that we contract, and I've talked to a couple of them, and they have said they have some drivers that are a little more vulnerable. They might have some, health conditions, things like that. And so all this since March, we've actually been transporting food and supplies and huge amounts, to all of our students. We had to get Chromebooks and hotspots to a lot of our students. So we were really busy doing that. And so we had our drivers, bus drivers doing that. And then we had staff that were volunteering to ride the buses and do the deliveries. And we had protocol that I helped put in place exactly how to keep social distancing. But there were a few drivers that just said they didn't feel comfortable. And so we respected that and said, that's fine. So we had everyone that drove for us, they volunteered to drive. So I know it's hard when we already have a huge driver shortage, but I think it's best to respect that when you can as well.
Yeah, I'd like to hop on that one too. I think it's important that you really start taking a collective note of what your resources are within your district, and really start taking temps with, not actual temperatures, but temps with your driver pool and what that's going to look like. Because I think it is important. We've been doing that for even the past couple months. We're keeping very engaged with the providers that we work with and the drivers to make sure that, hey, we do have a temp, what's going to come back? Because we know that when school starts back up, you know, I went through all these different scenarios of what districts might be doing, but there's a lot of districts out there that are reopening fully, and kids are going to be back in there fully, and it's, you know, they're not doing the Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing. So every district's going to have its own unique needs, and so I think the more that you can assess now what your resources are within your district and within your providers that you have, the better pulse you can get to say, hey, we might need to look out and find another contractor or another provider. You do have the time still, which is nice. I mean, there's not a ton of time, but there is time. So taking, you know, trying to maybe make sure that you really assess what you have available and what might not be available. I mean, someone could tell you, hey, I'm 50-50, and you just need to make a good decision with your leadership within your district at that point.
Great. Amy, were you going to add something there?
No, I agree. Yeah, what you said. Yeah.
Karen asked a question about what is your position on reimbursement for parent transport? Is that something you've heard anything about?
Well, you know, in the past, our member districts have, you know, given whatever the federal rate is, I think it's like 58 cents a mile, to families that have volunteered, you know, to transport. We have not talked about that with the COVID-19. So I'd like to hear maybe what other districts are doing, but you know, that might be a more cost-effective solution for a lot of districts.
Yeah, a lot of districts are actually talking about it. I sat on 4 different calls last week that I heard 4 different options that they're kind of putting that out with parents. Some districts, I mean, a lot of districts have done this, you know, over the years, right? And it's nothing really new, but it is kind of a new option out there that they're extending with parents. You know, some districts have, I will tell you that a lot of the times when they do that, they also involve the liability manager, risk manager within their district to say, hey, you know, what does that look like? So just if you're doing it, I would just make sure that, you know, again, many districts do involve the risk management within their district when they start making those decisions. But it's a good option and definitely a cost-effective one.
So Megan, since your specialty, you touched on this early on in our conversation, that your specialty is providing transportation for students with special needs and those who are displaced or covered under the McKinney-Vento Act. What are districts that you work with? What are they talking about in that respect?
I think it's, you know, kind of that list I went through before. You know, they're really talking and getting creative on, hey, can we group classes together, right? Can we take a different look at how we're approaching it? Can we separate out some of these, you know, students that are a bit more medically fragile or have, you know, immune disorders? So I think it's, you know, a lot of the districts are just, you know, the engagement has been great. I mean, I've never sat on so many calls in my life. I joke around that, like, I can't wait to be in person and talking with people, and I have had a couple in district meetings actually already, but I've never sat on so many conference calls. What's nice is everyone's engaged, and what we're talking about 2 weeks ago is completely different than what we're talking about today. There's districts where everything was remote 3 weeks ago to, hey, we're fully opening back up and we're coming back, you know, in the same start date. So I think it's just keeping a temp of, hey, what is your district doing? What are good protocols and procedures out there, and what's realistic at the end of the day? Because, you know, when we're, you know, and I know this is supposed to be about special education, and I always say there's special transportation, maybe not special, because special education is the subset, right? You have special transportation, special ed is one with all their individual needs. You have McKinney-Vento, which is another very challenging population for transportation that are, you know, they're very transient. They're going, sometimes they're in a shelter, and sometimes they're over at grandma's 2 weeks later. So it's very difficult to make sure that we're keeping track and tabs of these students. And then you'll also have the medically fragile students that we mentioned. And I think it'd be good to note real quick too, that a lot of the conversations have been around, especially districts that typically have very large McKinney-Vento numbers. They're really kind of bracing for what the numbers might look like this coming year. So I think it's something to keep a really good tab on. Because again, you know, McKinney-Vento, you really can't go in and qualify until really day one, right? Maybe a couple weeks before you get up and going. But a lot of the times, districts have a really difficult time with assessing all of the McKinney-Vento needs that are coming in after they come in after day one. So it's going to be very difficult to assess what those needs are. So having extra resources and having plans in place of what might we need as a district, because I will tell you that there's a lot of conversations from the McKinney-Vento liaison side that we've been having, that they are really kind of bracing for what this next year might look like because of unemployment, because of parents not having jobs, that a lot of students are going to more than likely qualify. So those numbers should be going up. So it's going to be, not only do you have all this COVID, how are we preparing there and special needs, but you really have this other subset of McKinney-Vento students that have been displaced that, it is federally, mandated, you have to transport. So, and I think it's actually like a 3-day window or a 24-hour window it's supposed to be, which is almost impossible for districts. So just something to start thinking about as we're planning, because those numbers definitely will be rising.
Yes, that's definitely going to be an issue. We've been talking about that too, and our district has a large McKinney-Vento population, and we're bracing for that. And the thing is, a lot of the students, a lot of the McKinney-Vento students are transported on type 3 vehicles, vans, and so that's something too, is are we safely going to be able to transport even 2 students in a van to keep social distancing, things like that. And then are more medically fragile students too, they might have to be by themselves in a van to make sure to keep, themselves and the bus, or the transportation staff safe. So just a lot of things to look forward to.
That's great.
Yeah.
To look for. Megan, you mentioned, that there are, and I think you both have, we talked about this yesterday, about there are options. And so districts are looking for additional support and resources. What are some things that we should avoid or look out for when we're looking into alternative student transportation? And you can both talk about this, but Megan, I'll start with you.
I think there's call it 5 or 6 real big things that you should be kind of considering when you look into this option. One, don't just settle because you need it yesterday. Sometimes I feel like a lot of districts go into a rush. That's what I'm saying. There's time to prepare right now. There's time to go out and make sure that you find the right provider, the right partner for your district. But yeah, a lot of the times I do get a lot of feedback of, well, we had to go with it because we needed it right then and there. So take the time, don't just settle because, again, you needed it yesterday. 2, make sure they're an alternative student transportation provider. So, student transportation has specific guidelines, right? And specific state requirements that you have to follow. And you want to make sure that they're following what your states are. So settling for the wrong vendor could open you up to liabilities that you don't want anything to do with. So make sure that you understand what your state laws and regulatory requirements are. And then consistency would be the third, just because I've said it 100 times, but it is extremely important. Some providers are, and I've said it because there's some providers that are really unable to do this because of their models. So make sure that you're understanding, what their model really looks like. The 4th is individual needs of the students and ability to provide the resources to meet those needs. Wheelchair accessibility, oxygen tank securement, safety vests, whatever your needs might be for your district. And then, 5 would be safety safety measures in place on the vehicles and for the students. And then 6 is, and I kind of add this 6th one in it, but it is a critical step that I think a lot of districts miss, is just don't take anyone's word for it. Call references, call another district. Again, they should have experience in transporting students with disabilities, students with special transportation needs. It's a very difficult thing, and you definitely learn over the years the rights, the wrongs, the ins and outs. And so someone that has experience and really understands it, especially during this time where we're already having additional unique circumstances. So I think really just doing your due diligence is extremely important.
Right. Anything you want to add to that, Amy?
Well, everything she said, yeah, it's
great.
but no, I have some things said. So yeah, training is a big thing. That's what I have found. You know, I told you we have 3 different contractors, but then we deal with, you know, interact with 11 member districts and 30 districts altogether that transport kids into all of our sites. And, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And so, you know, the biggest thing, and that's what I work with our staff. I'm like, they don't have their special education degree. They don't have like I mean, they have training, but not extensive training like our staff. They are very skilled in how to teach and interact with special education students. And a lot of the drivers aren't as much. And so I started an all driver and bus aid academy. This will be our 4th year this year having it. And so we have them come to one of our schools. This year, we're going to do it online instead. But I teach positive behavior interventions and supports. I have another person that talks about how to interact with students that have emotional behavior disorders, kids that have autism. We now, you know, have where we're learning more in our district and really concentrating on a lot of our students have the disabilities that they have because they've experienced childhood trauma. So we have someone that talks about childhood trauma. And it's a 4-hour training that we have like a couple weeks before school starts. And since we've been doing that, and I really interact and have an open door policy for all the districts to call me if they're having issues with students, since we've implemented all of that, it's so much better because the drivers feel that they're supported and they're given the training that they need. So training is the key in open communication.
That's great. Thank you. Peter asked a question about if there are any states that are providing useful guidance to districts that you could highlight. Maybe people can go and search those out. Regarding transporting students with special needs. I know, Amy, you're in Minnesota, but you might also have a wider, you know, perspective still. And Megan, with your perspective, any states that you'd want to highlight that are providing some useful guidance?
Yeah, I think a lot of states are starting to, and I think they're changing it. We actually have in something that'll be posted by the end of this week. So on our website, it's alcschools.com. We've been making sure that, you know, we have our COVID policy. We're going to be updating again the states that we're in, kind of with their policies and what they're kind of putting out there. So that's something that we're going to continually update and make sure it's available for, you know, anybody. I mean, all of our district partners. We just want to make sure that they have access to it. So it's something that we'll definitely keep tabs on. There's a lot of districts that are or states that are kind of coming out with different answers on some unique circumstances. But again, in terms of like, you know, everybody masks, everybody this, a lot of the time it does come down to the region. But in terms of a couple interesting state ones that have come out, I can think of, I think Colorado Department of Ed, and then in Texas, I believe they did the same. They came out again with some of those, because there's a lot of questions around barriers, right? I know we haven't really brought that up here, but the CDC guidelines at some point, I think it had, you know, having barriers, installing barriers in cars and in vehicles. So I know that both those states kind of came out, you know, obviously it's kind of in violation of the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, which really prohibits aftermarket additions. And really that's just because, you know, if you alter a vehicle, there can be a reaction or a different reaction during an accident. So, you know, I know that they both, you know, kind of said that's not something we're wanting districts to do at this time. But on top of that, I think there's been a lot of controversy in a lot of districts that we've been speaking with on the barrier aspect, just to touch on it for a second, is, you know, whether it's hard or soft plastic, there's a lot of concerns across the board that they can distort the line of sight for drivers. And really just, it becomes a really big safety hazard. So I just caution districts, because I think a lot of when COVID hit, everybody ran out and was like, let's get our sanitizer, and, you know, came out and let's get this, let's do that. I think it's just going in it with a cautionary, hey, what are the best protocols for procedures out there? Every state's going to be different. Every district's probably going to be different. So, you know, just making the best decisions of what it is, and engage with, I think it's really important to engage with your district leadership and talking about all of those different things as you're coming up with you know, what might be best, because what might be best for, you know, a district right here might be totally different for a district in Minnesota. So.
Which is what you said at the very beginning, that it could be different, you know, one district over. So, Amy, anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, actually in California, where Megan's from, I think because quite a few of the districts are planning to go back full time, we've seen that they've made, I've seen Sacramento especially has made some real concrete protocols. So you could, you know, look at that. I've seen that. I've been to the NAPT site. There's a lot of good information on that as well. Minnesota is still working, you know, on our protocols, but yeah, just search out, you know, what you can. We have been talking with our lieutenant for the state patrol for who's in charge of commercial vehicles and school buses, and he doesn't. Or the whole state patrol does not like, you know, the barrier around the driver very well. There is, I believe, it's Thomas Bus. They are doing, I don't know if people have seen that they've sent out, they're doing kind of a test protocol on that that's supposed to be crash resistant, but they haven't said the price yet. So that's the thing, is we're going to put all these measures in place, and are we going to have funds for it? And like Megan said, you know, I think everyone has seen the plastic, looks like a shower curtain, and that absolutely, the state patrol said, you know, no, because it is going to distort the driver's vision. So the state patrol says that the plastic, you know, face guard, that would be okay, you know, to use. So again, you know, you can be creative, but when it comes to safety, make sure you're checking, you know, with your state patrol and or your state Department of Education.
That's great. Quickly, Amy, on this, and then I'm going to ask you guys to give me your final takeaways. A lot of interest in the training that you provide, and so can you just give us kind of a quick overview of what type of training takes place at the academy?
Sure. So
is it Amy? I'm sorry. Sorry.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, that's okay. So, yeah, I just, speaking of trying to be creative, I just saw that there was a problem, and I was spending all my time reacting to a lot of things, and I would, you know, look at bus video, read the reports, and I would just, you know, and I had my experience of working with the kids, and I'd be like, well, why did you do that? Why did you say that to them? Because a lot of times they set the kid up. Well, they just didn't know what they didn't know. And so again, training was important. So I just thought I have to do something. And the key I would say is go to your special ed department. I have a really good open door policy with my special ed director. And I know all the principals in my district. I know a lot of the case managers. So just talk to them and find out from them what they see as issues. You know, they're at the buses more often, and my staff has learned to come to me with issues. So that's how it came. And so I went to them and I just asked for volunteers. I talked to our special ed director and I said, I need somebody that can present about how to interact with EBD students. I need someone to talk about kids with autism. And some I already knew because I've been with the district so long, but then if you don't know, just reach out to people, and you have wonderful skilled experts right in your district that can help out.
Amy, I can tell you right now, you're probably going to get some people knocking on your door. I just had Judith just sent a note. I would love to have something like this in my district. How do I go about doing this? We're running out of time, but we're going to follow through with anybody who asked a question that we either didn't address directly or where you want to go a little deeper. We're going to be sending our expert panelists the questions that we received. We had a lot of really wonderful questions, and we did try to get to as many as possible. But before we go, I want to ask you if you could each give me, I'll start with you, Megan, and then with you, Amy, just a final takeaway, what you'd want people to either go back to their offices and share with their bosses or maybe share with parents. What's a final takeaway from today?
Goodness. Well, I suppose it's, you know, the biggest message is that special transportation is it's about individual needs. You know, when we're talking, there's many different scenarios. So not one size fits all when you're talking about it. You know, coming up with a policy, just know that it's going to have to change, and it's going to have to change to make sure it accommodates all of the students so they can get, you know, equal opportunity to education. I think that's for me probably the biggest. I also wanted to mention, we didn't mention it on this, but you know, there is that STARTS task force, which is NASDIPS, NAPT, and NSTA have come together to be able to put together this task force kind of on policies and procedures. And I know that they're starting to get together, and they're going to be working together on that. So kind of, you know, I'm sure that everyone will see it, but kind of something to mention, and it's going to be a resource that should be out there with some good advice for districts.
Yeah, we're going to have them come back when they get closer to reporting out. So awesome. Amy?
Well, I guess, you know, for those of you that are leaders, just being patient and listening. You know, we all, especially in transportation, we're just going so fast and we want to fix everything. And so you just need to slow down and listen to, you know, the needs of your staff. And then, you know, again, communicate with those special ed directors. And you're going to have to just be flexible on a case-by-case basis. The other thing, if you want more information about PBIS that I talked about, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, there's actually, if you go to PBIS World, and I found that just from doing my training and needing more information, that is a wonderful website and resource, and that you can kind of set up some of your training right there. So
super. Actually, I think we'll link to that as well. That sounds like a great resource. Thank you. So I knew the time was going to go by fast, and it did. Amy and Megan, I just want to thank you so much again for your time and your expertise. I think that you gave us a lot of takeaways, a lot of things to think about. I want to just share that if one of the things that we like to do is try to categorize as many great stories as there are out there of how districts are serving their communities. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily clients of ours, and that's okay. But we really want to gather anybody who has, as you know, Megan mentioned, some of the creative approaches to serving their communities. So if you do have a story, it might make its way into a webinar or a white paper. So if you do have a story, please email mystory@transfinder.com, and we'll definitely be following up, and we'll put that on our best practices page. The other thing is, I just want to have you mark your calendars for June 23rd at 1 p.m. when we can continue with our best practices webinar series with NAPT. Again, I want to thank NAPT and Mike Martin. They've been just amazing leaders in a very challenging time. So I just want to thank them for this partnership. And until then, I just want to thank you again. Thank everybody for attending, and thanks again, Megan and Amy, for just sharing so many insights with us. Have a great rest of your day.
yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye.